Ryan and I have been close friends ever since I was 7. We used to be neighbors, and we were very mischievous. When Ryan and I were 16, our appearances were truly strange. I had piercings in any spot I could, wore bright neon colors, and had long hair that covered most of my face. Ryan, on the other hand, preferred a rather slick look, having all his hair and eyebrows shaved, and wearing tight-fitting clothes. At the age when many psychological changes occur, we became even more disliked in the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood. Not a single family was unaware of our bad reputation, nor any of them had ever escaped our bizarre pranks. However, we would only take things as far as playful teasing, with no intention of hurting others or engaging in criminal activities. Let's see what game we'll play today. According to the list, which house should we go to? I discussed with Ryan. The house at the end of the street just had new people move in, Ryan said. Is it that abandoned house? I asked, surprised. Let's go check it out. We were both really excited. The abandoned house at the end of the street was forgotten, but Ryan and I loved it. We even called it our secret base. It was true that someone had moved in because the front door had been replaced, and the surrounding area had been tidied up. Ryan and I approached and knocked on the door after curiously surveying the house. The door slowly opened, and a woman appeared. She had pale skin, sunken eyes, and a completely expressionless face. I guessed she must be in her 60s. Hello, ma'am. We live in this neighborhood, too. You just moved in, right? I confidently greeted her. What is it? Her voice was so cold that I shivered, and there was a very unpleasant smell. I was stunned, staring at her face until Ryan nudged my arm gently. We have a small gift to welcome you, I said, presenting a small box. The woman stared at it for a moment before taking it, and the unpleasant smell returned as she said thank you. Ryan tugged at my shirt, and we quickly left. We peeked outside the gate to watch the woman's reaction to the gift we had given her. She opened the box, and a toad jumped out, but contrary to our expectations, she remained completely calm. What? Is this the first time we failed? Ryan exclaimed, surprised. Did you smell that really awful odor earlier? I asked Ryan, who looked at me puzzled. Ryan and I turned our gaze back to the woman. Both of us froze as we watched her stuff the creature into her mouth and chew ravenously. Elton, did you see that? Ryan's voice trembled. I didn't answer. We could both clearly see the frog's hind legs still swaying in rhythm with her chewing. I pulled Ryan away, both of us silent with our own thoughts. Eventually, we agreed to keep observing that woman. The next day, after school, we watched her again, but from a different angle. It seemed like she lived alone. After a while without seeing her, we were about to leave when we heard a noise. The woman had returned. It turned out she hadn't been home all this time. She was carrying a large sack, but she was surprisingly agile, which is unusual for someone as old as her. Whatever was inside the sack seemed to be moving. However, it didn't seem to interfere with the way she swiftly dazzled between places. Neither of us would be able to move it, Elton, Ryan whispered. I've told you before, she's all but normal, I muttered. But the surprises just didn't stop there. The woman went toward the backyard of the house, pulling out a healthy, living chicken from the bag. Ryan and I both understood that the bag was filled with chickens, and there must be dozens of them inside. The chicken struggled violently, flapping its wings wildly, its beak screaming in fear. The woman, without a moment's hesitation, gripped the chicken tightly with both hands and suddenly bit down deeply into its neck. The sound of flesh being torn apart rang out. Hot red blood splashed out, flowing down her face and hands. The woman's mouth was full of blood, red patches of raw flesh between her teeth. She chewed voraciously, the wet crunching sound echoing in the still air. The chicken was still alive, writhing in pain, its eyes wide with panic as life slowly drained from its body. Ryan's lips trembled slightly. He seemed desperate to say something, but couldn't get the words out. I swallowed hard. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, my hands gripping Ryan's so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Cold sweat rolled down my forehead, each drop falling onto my face, merging with the thick, suffocating atmosphere of fear. We wanted to look away, but we couldn't. Our eyes were glued to the scene of the crazed woman, ravenously gnawing at the chunks of the chicken, while our bodies trembled, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of the horror overwhelming us. Ryan's backpack dropped to the ground, cutting through the eerie atmosphere like a knife. The woman turned towards us, her gaze like a jolt to the brain, snapping us back to reality. Ryan and I ran without pausing to grab our backpacks, our hands tightly clasped together. When we got to Ryan's house, his parents saw our frantic state and thought we had just gotten into trouble again. Both of us hurriedly recounted the incident, but all we got in return were annoyed expressions from Ryan's parents. We stormed back into Ryan's room. "Are you saying we should go back to that creepy woman's place?" Ryan exclaimed when he heard me mention wanting to figure things out. "Your backpack is still there," Ryan said, helpless against my convincing reasoning. That evening, we arranged to conduct our investigation after dinner. Ryan's backpack was still there. There was a faint sound of crying, but loud enough for me and Ryan to hear. We exchanged glances, searching for the source of the sound. From inside the house, the woman emerged, still carrying a large sack over her shoulder. She set it down in the yard, slowly removing the outer layer to reveal a trembling little boy around 5 or 6 years old. Immediately, I grabbed Ryan, holding him tightly with one hand while covering his mouth with the other. With a sudden motion, she grabbed the child's wrist and yanked him toward herself. The baby screamed in fear, but the scream was quickly muffled as her bony hand tightened. Her fingers dug into the child's skin. She leaned close to the baby's face, smelling the scent of the soft skin, her eyes sparkling with madness. "Fresh meat," she muttered like an evil curse, her voice mixed with crazy laughter of someone who had completely lost their reason. Her hands clawed and her mouth opened wide as if preparing to tear the baby apart. Ryan and I shouted loudly, rushing to pull the baby out of that crazy woman's clutches. The brawl quickly got everyone's attention. They quickly arrived and called the police. The woman tried to run away but was stopped. She emitted a smell that made everyone hold their breath. The police showed up to control the woman. Inside her house, countless pieces of bones, meat, and other animals were found trapped and rotting. She was taken to a mental hospital after the police and doctors concluded that she had a mental illness due to living in isolation for a long time. No information or identification documents of hers were found. After only 2 weeks, she escaped from the hospital and disappeared. Although the police's conclusion was due to illness and circumstances, I thought that woman was like the reincarnation of Satan. The neighbor was always at the window every night, and then I found out the creepy truth. I'm Glenda, 28 years old. I just moved into an apartment after my lease ended at my old place. My apartment's in a mid-range complex with 2 buildings facing each other. I spent a couple weekends cleaning the place and grabbing some stuff. I worked hard to make the place comfier, and I was pretty proud of how it turned out. But I didn't see the nightmare coming my way. I went to open the window for some fresh air on the 7th floor, the top floor, and spotted a dark shadow by the window in the apartment across from mine. I didn't think much of it and just kept looking around my neighborhood, feeling this weird kind of happiness. Later that evening, while I was chilling on the couch watching TV, I glanced over at the window of the apartment across and that same dark shadow from earlier was still there. I looked a little closer, and it seemed like it was a guy, but I didn't think much of it. It'd be kind of weird to just stare into someone else's window. Pretty quickly, I got my life on track in the new place. I said hi to the neighbors, trying to make some good connections. On the second evening, after getting home from work, the first thing I did was head to the window and throw the curtains open to let some fresh air in. I was kind of shocked to see that black shadow still at the window across the way. The owner of that apartment probably just loved chilling by the window and people watching. That night, I stayed up pretty late, dealing with some last-minute work stuff. By the time I wrapped up, it was almost 2 a.m. Even though I was super tired, the second I looked at the window, I was wide awake. The black shadow was still there, hadn't moved at all since 8 hours ago. I started getting a weird feeling, so I closed the curtains and went back to my room. It took me forever to fall asleep. The next morning, I ran into my neighbor as soon as I left the house. She said she'd been living here for almost 10 years, so I asked her about the apartment on the 7th floor in the building across. His name's Charles, around 60 years old. You're better off staying away from that old guy if you don't want any trouble. He's been caught up in a bunch of lawsuits for invading people's privacy. People around here don't want to mess with him because of that. I got chills when I heard my neighbor's story. So Charles has been following me for the last 2 days. My mind was racing as I tried to think back on everything, making sure I hadn't messed up with my behavior or what I was wearing. I felt like a lost soul all day, couldn't focus on anything. I was just stoked to find a new place, but now I had to live in fear and be super careful because of my neighbor's weird and creepy reputation. I'd never opened any of the curtains in my apartment, not even for a sec. This went on for 3 days, and I felt super suffocated. I called the building security and told them what was going on, hoping they'd step in and sort it all out. I decided not to show up to avoid making a scene since I had just moved in. About 2 days after I talked to building security, feeling a bit more at ease, I finally opened the curtains again. But surprisingly, the shadow was still there. I quickly called security again, and they said they couldn't get in touch with Mr. Charles. He might have gone to his son's for a few days. This isn't the first time we couldn't reach him. Are you guys serious? He's still at the window, staring at my apartment. We'll check it out and sort this ASAP. I stopped paying attention to what the security guard was saying. Remembering the binoculars my dad gave me back in high school, I started digging through the unpacked boxes to find them. I yanked the curtains all the way open and threw the window open, then grabbed the binoculars to check out the apartment across the street. At first, my head was spinning, so I put down the binoculars and started having a hard time breathing. Shakily, I lifted the binoculars to double-check what I saw, and that was the worst decision I ever made. The window of the apartment across the street had a man's body standing there with his head pressed against the glass. His body had patches of skin hanging down, and his eye sockets were dark and deep, with his mouth wide open like he was totally freaking out. I let out a huge scream, and the sound of terror echoed from the top floor, shattering the quiet vibe of the place. I rushed out of the house, banging on all the neighbors' doors, begging them to call the cops ASAP. The body was Mr. Charles, who had died about a week ago from a stroke. He had a pretty bad reputation, according to the neighbor, so nobody really cared that he hadn't showed up in days. Mr. Charles had a son living in the next city, and when he heard about his dad's death, he looked totally shocked and devastated. He played it off by saying they weren't really that close, which is why he hadn't checked in on Mr. Charles for days. I moved out of that apartment right away and crashed at a hotel for a few days before finding a new place. Even now, 8 years after that crazy incident, I still wonder, why was Mr. Charles standing against the window when he died? Did his stroke really hit him out of nowhere? Or was there something else going on? I'm Victor. I'm 27, and I work as an IT engineer. I make a pretty decent living. I've got a girlfriend who usually comes over to my place on the weekends and stays the night. My apartment's in a small building that's not super modern, but the rent is pretty reasonable. I could afford to move to a nicer place, but I'm fine with where I'm at. My neighbors are pretty friendly. Basically, we just say hello when we see each other, maybe lend a few small household items and keep to ourselves. That's all I need from my neighbors, and luckily, that's exactly what I've got. But there's one exception. He lives in the opposite apartment and is around my age. He's not nosy or anything, but his actions do bother me and others. He doesn't have a stable job, and he spends all day doing silly stuff, filming it and posting it on social media. When he sees people reacting and commenting, he laughs out loud. His jokes are pretty loud and end up bothering everyone around him. One time, the hallway was filled with foam crumbs. They ended up blowing into my apartment and my neighbor's place next door. It even got in my throat while I was walking and talking on the phone. That was from one of his ridiculous challenges. I don't mean to judge anyone or their job, but in his case, he's causing trouble and discomfort for more than just me. He's asked me to be a guest on his challenge many times, but at that time it was 11 p.m. I was in my pajamas, and I couldn't have looked more annoyed. After that, I was really busy with work and wasn't home much. One afternoon, I had a dinner date with my girlfriend, so we decided to spend some time together. When I got back to my apartment, there was a huge package blocking the entrance to our garage. I didn't remember ordering anything, so I got out of the car and went over to check out the package. It was addressed to that neighbor who's always causing trouble, and it said it was a returned package. That meant he had sent the package, and for some reason, it was returned. I figured he bought the equipment for his video shoot. I moved it aside to clear the way for the car to get into the garage, and the package was insanely heavy. He must have bought a whole cow. I accidentally let go of it, and the package fell to the ground. There was a sound like plastic breaking. I was a bit panicked, but I quickly brushed it off. I figured I'd just tell him it was the carrier's fault, and that would be the end of it. I left the package next to the garage door, where it was covered by the roof. My girlfriend had just arrived, so we went inside, cooked together, and had a nice peaceful evening. The next morning we drove to work. As I passed the garage door, I was a bit surprised to see his package still there. Oh well, he'd see it anyway. I had a new project and was busy at work for 3 days straight. When I got back to the apartment after 3 days, I found the package still there. The cardboard box underneath was damp and a bit dented. I smelled something bad while I was still in the car. Someone in the building asked me, "Have you seen Dennis?" "I was at work. I just got home today," I said. "The bad smell has been there for a few days. Everyone's busy at work like me, so they don't notice. I have to deal with it by myself." I decided to deal with the package first. My neighbor was probably off doing some challenge somewhere. He'd been away from home for days like this a few times before. In the afternoon, after getting some rest, I grabbed scissors, gloves, and a bunch of large plastic bags and headed to the garage. The package was now leaking a red liquid, and it was swarming with flies. I wore 2 masks, but the smell was so strong it almost made me throw up a few times.
I was fed up with dealing with the fallout from his ridiculous challenges, and now I had to clean up this mess from my neighbor. It had to be food he ordered to use later, which is why it smelled so awful. When I sliced the tape open, I saw a clear plastic box with something inside that I couldn't quite identify, but there were tons of maggots mixed in with some cloth. I tore off another piece of cardboard from the carton, bent down to take a closer look, and was met with the sight of a face being eaten away by thousands of wriggling creatures. I screamed and immediately called the police. 10 minutes later, the police showed up, took the package right away, and asked me to come down to the station to give a statement. After the forensic results came in, they concluded that the body in the package was my neighbor. He had died from suffocation. Another friend who often helped him with filming videos went to the police station to make a report. 2 weeks ago, he took on a new challenge. He was going to turn himself into a package and travel across the states. He packed some dry food, waste bags, and climbed into a plastic box. In the beginning, he still kept in touch with his friend and mentioned how much he was enjoying it. He could feel the shaking whenever the truck was moving. His friend was busy with work and forgot about it. The most unfortunate thing happened to this guy, who was way too young. The price he paid for his recklessness was just too scary. I hope no one else becomes a victim of pointless pranks, especially kids, with social media being what it is today.
I'm Orla, 29 years old, living in Houston. I have a happy life because I enjoy my work and have extra income. Currently, I live alone in a spacious and cozy house. My house is in a somewhat secluded area of the neighborhood, but that's okay because I like peace and privacy. The neighbors around here aren't very friendly, to say the least. They're somewhat peculiar. I choose not to pay them any mind. They're not relevant to me at all. On that evening, like any other day, I returned home at 6 p.m. After dinner and a shower, I went to bed at 10 p.m., starting to enjoy what I consider the best time of the day. I got into bed, lying comfortably with a book I was halfway through. I called Milo, my cat whom I've had for 2 years. Usually, when Milo hears me call, he happily runs over and lies next to me. But this time he curled up, staring ahead. I looked at Milo and chuckled, thinking he must be full and feeling lazy. I started reading and forgot about Milo's odd behavior. After a while, feeling tired, I changed position, inadvertently noticing that Milo was still lying there, staring under the bed. I approached, picked up Milo, and returned to bed. I placed Milo on my stomach, his favorite lying position. Surprisingly, he fluffed up, emitting little grunts as if being vigilant and uncomfortable with me. Milo jumped off the bed, returning to his previous spot. I sat on the bed, puzzled by his strange behavior. Following Milo's gaze, he was indeed looking under the bed. I started feeling uneasy. I couldn't bring myself to look under the bed, and I didn't know why. Looking around the room, my heart seemed to stop when I inadvertently glanced at the mirror in the corner. The mirror, coincidentally, reflected a bit under the bed, where a dark figure, seemingly a man, was present. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his glaring white, wild eyes staring out. I was truly panicked. I bit my lip, trying not to make any unusual noise. I told myself to stay calm, try to act like I didn't know anything. Otherwise, he might lose control, and I would be in terrible danger. I tried to breathe, regulate my heartbeat, then observe the room to figure out a solution. The first thing I wanted to do was call the police. But my phone was charging and placed on a table 3 meters away from the bed. My body trembled. I wasn't sure if I could get off the bed, but at that moment, I had no choice but to take a risk. I couldn't sit here and panic forever. Slowly, I stepped off the bed, trying to straighten up, pretending I was very comfortable. Approaching the phone, I trembled, trying to dial the police number. I struggled for a while, my brain unable to control my body. Finally, I managed to call the police, but I wasn't calm enough and accidentally turned on the speaker. 911, what's your emergency? I immediately hung up, standing rooted to the ground, squeezing the phone tightly as if trying to break it. It felt like I hadn't breathed for 3 minutes. After seeing no reaction from the man, I immediately texted my best friend to call the police for me. Suddenly, I heard a metallic clash, like a knife scraping under the floor. I sent the message and quickly turned off the phone. I mentally prepared for what would happen next. When I turned back, I panicked to see Milo playing with a small knife under the bed. In an instant, I rushed to pick up Milo and grab the knife, then ran out and slammed the door shut. I stood staring at the door, breathing heavily. It felt like leaving the bedroom gave me enough oxygen to breathe. I hugged Milo tightly, my hands trembling, pointing the knife straight towards the door. I was sure the next thing would be banging on the door, cursing, and a madman rushing out. I was ready to resist at any cost. But I didn't hear any noise. Everything was eerily silent. I couldn't know what that man really wanted. How he managed to break into my house and hide under my bed for how long. Whether he would suddenly appear here and end my life. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens rang out, and I hugged Milo tightly, running out quickly. When I met the police, I told them everything that had just happened. I felt relieved. After the police searched my bedroom and all the other nooks and crannies in the house, the truly horrifying thing appeared. They found the body of a dead man under my bed. I was stunned to realize it was Robert, the creepy neighbor. Robert lived alone opposite my house, a man over 50 years old. Robert had repeatedly accosted me to spend the night with him. I overlooked it, thinking he had mental issues, until I lost patience and threatened to call the police. Robert stopped his creepy antics. After the investigation, the police said Robert died of a sudden stroke. He had been dead for about 12 hours, which was the time I was away on a business trip and hadn't returned home. It was horrifying to imagine how he would have acted if I had been home at that time. I redesigned my house with the bedroom in a different location and started using a mattress directly on the floor instead of a bed. Until now, the image of Robert with his glaring, wild, white eyes still deeply haunts me.